They erased her existence in one night. She, an elderly African-American woman, rebuilt everything without asking permission.
The city was always loud, a constant hum of life and motion. But on that particular morning, all the noise just seemed to fade away. My focus was entirely on a young woman standing alone on the sidewalk. Her shoulders were tense, her eyes looked hollow, and she clutched a small bag to her chest like it held her entire world. And in many ways, I guess it did. I'd known her for years, not as a close friend, but enough to see the quiet strength she always carried. It was a strength she needed because her life had been a masterclass in control. Her family ruled over her with an iron fist, disguising fear as protection and obedience as love. She was a bird in a gilded cage, taught to sing their songs but never to fly. The truth, when it finally broke free, didn't come from a tearful confession or a brave declaration. It came from a consequence. A single mistake in their eyes was enough to justify erasing her from their lives. They didn't ask her what happened, how she felt, or what she needed. They saw only their own shame reflected back at them, and they reacted with a swift, cold cruelty. The front door clicked shut behind her without a moment's hesitation, and just like that, the love she had known her entire life became conditional. She stood there on the pavement, completely frozen, abandoned by the very people who had taught her to be obedient but never how to be compassionate. No one came after her. No one called her name. The silence from that house was more deafening than the city traffic. When I pulled my car over to the curb, she didn't cry, not right away. It was as if the shock was holding her together more firmly than hope ever had. Her voice trembled as she started to explain what had happened, each word landing with a heavy thud. Fear was her new shadow, clinging to her every move, layered with a guilt that was never hers to carry alone. She truly believed she deserved this, that she had brought this abandonment upon herself. I looked at her and said, "Survival is not a disgrace?" Those words seemed to crack something open inside her. The first priority was simple: shelter. Before we could untangle the emotional knots, she needed a safe place to land. The room we found was much small and a little worn, but it offered something she had unhad in a long time: peace. And that peace felt so unfamiliar, almost foreign to her. The first few days passed in a slow, disorienting blur as the reality of her new situation began to sink in. The future felt like a vast, empty canvas, which was uncertain, but for the first time, not completely terrifying. The shame her family had branded her with was a heavy burden, but I watched her begin to unlearn it, piece by painful piece. Support didn't come from family. It came from her own quiet resilience. It's a hard lesson to learn, but strength doesn't always flow from bloodlines. As the weeks turned into months, the weight of her responsibility grew heavier. Her body was changing, a constant reminder of the life growing inside her. Fear and hope were now constant companions, mixing together in equal measure. There were long nights filled with doubt, questioning every decision, followed by mornings filled with a renewed, quiet resolve. Every single day demanded a fresh reserve of courage. The past was a quiet ghost that haunted her waking moments. She found herself missing the very people who had cast her out. Healing is never logical, and love doesn't just switch off like a light. Pain and affection can coexist in the most confusing ways. Eventually, a confrontation became unavoidable. The truth has a funny way of demanding to be heard. The reunion, when it happened, was just as I'd feared: cold, controlled, and transactional. There was no warmth in the room, no affection in their eyes. Judgment sat in the place where empathy should have been, and a heavy silence filled the space where an apology was needed. Walking away from them a second time was heartbreaking, but it was also easier. Closure, she realized, could arrive without forgiveness. Slowly, through sheer effort rather than luck, her life began to stabilize. Independence started to replace the constant fear. She learned to make her own decisions, big and small, without asking for permission. At first, that freedom felt strange, almost uncomfortable. But then she found a job, and with it came a new sense of confidence. The simple routine of work began to restore her dignity. The support she found in new friends was mutual and unconditional, a stark contrast to the love she had once known. And in this new environment, love began to grow again, quietly and without the need for control. The day her child was born changed everything. In an instant, her purpose crystallized. Motherhood gifted her a strength she never knew she possessed. The fear she had for herself transformed into a fierce, unwavering protection for her baby. There were, eventually, a few half-hearted attempts at reconciliation from her family, but they came too late. The boundaries she had built were now firm and non-negotiable. Time had revealed patterns of behavior that couldn't be denied or excused, and the distance she had created gave her a clarity she never had before. Gradually, the past began to lose its grip. The ache of longing was slowly replaced by the steady process of healing. A new life was taking shape, one built on a foundation of honesty instead of obedience. And that honesty, her own truth, felt revolutionary. Her future began to expand beyond mere survival. Dreams, which had been packed away for so long, started to cautiously return. She no longer looked to others for approval. Her self-worth was now something she cultivated from within. Love grew quietly and steadily, and trust was rebuilt, one small, intentional act at a time. Mistakes were no longer labels of failure, but lessons for growth. Guilt was replaced by the quiet pride of progress. The city still felt loud, but now its noise sounded like life, like energy, like possibility, not a threat. She walked through its streets with a confidence that came from within. The family that had rejected her faded into a distant memory, a chapter in a book that was now closed. The family she was building, the one of just her and her child, was real, tangible, and full of unconditional love. Freedom didn't arrive in a big, dramatic moment. It arrived quietly, consistently, in the small choices she made every single day. Her strength was no longer a forced act of defiance. It was natural, a part of who she had become. Her story didn't end with revenge or a triumphant return. It ended and began with independence. The loss she endured was transformed into clarity. The pain she suffered was transformed into purpose. She was no longer defined by rejection. She was defined by her own incredible resilience. And in choosing herself, in choosing her child, she created a future that no one could ever control or ever take away from her again. Thank you so much for listening. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more content. Take care.